So as filmmakers, we have loads of different tools, loads of different techniques that we can utilize to help tell our story. And for me, one of the biggest ways we can do that is with our camera movement. I like to use handheld shooting when I want my audience to feel like they're in the scene with my character, right up in the action, getting right stuck in. And then other times I want my audience to feel like they've taken a step back and observing the scene. And that's when I like to use a tripod and things like a gimbal. Slow the scene down, let them take in the environment where the character is instead of being right up in the action, right up with them. They're both two very, very good techniques, and I'm going to go over them today so that you can utilize them in your films. Sounds good, yeah? Let's get stuck in. Bosh. You lot, I hope you're all sweet. So this video is sponsored by Storyblocks. I'll be talking about them a little bit later, but for now, let's go over camera movement, because I think camera movement is one of the most important things when it comes to telling a story, trying to make your audience feel a certain way. Because when I'm making a film, all I'm really trying to do is pull emotions out of my audience. I want people to feel a certain thing when they're watching one of my films. And using camera movement can really allow your audience to either feel like they're being thrown into the scene with the character, they're right there and they can literally feel the elements, or they've taken a nice big step back and looking in on the scene instead of feeling like they're in it. And for me, in my films, I like to kind of use a mixture of both depending on how I want my audience to feel at different times during the film. So let's go over handheld movement and then let's go over gimbal movement and see when we can use them to utilize different emotions and different feelings, and hopefully you guys can implement them into your films as well. So handheld movement. So when I first started out in my career filming, I was doing like a lot of sports brand commercials. I actually used to do loads of boxing campaigns, right? When there was a new boxer coming up on the scene, I'd actually get hired to go and shoot their promotional video for their debut fight or something like that. And I'd always go in and we'd shoot the boxer doing their training. They're going in there, they're fighting, loads of action, very, very aggressive, loads of movement. And to promote a fight, you want to make it seem intense, rough. You want to give people excitement. And for me, the only real way to do that is with handheld movement. If you're going to use a gimbal on very, very fast action, it just doesn't really make sense. It doesn't give you that feeling of you're right up in there in the mix. It just slows things down a bit and it allows you to observe it instead of when you're going handheld, you feel like you're stuck in, mate. You're right in there having the business with the fighter, do you know what I mean? You feel like you're in the ring with them. And that is something that I think is a very, very important element of shooting something like a sports campaign. However, on a lot of them shoots, I would use a gimbal or a tripod to introduce the scene. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally to kick off your scene with handheld unless you want a very heavy, fast-paced start to your scene. For me personally, obviously, depending on the story, I like to slow things down at the start, establish where we are, establish the scene, and then once we start to kick off, jump into handheld movement. You can actually mix them two styles together. It makes a lot of sense to me to mix them together because I don't want my audience to be in the mix the whole time. Like, you want to build up them intense moments and then pull them back a little bit. Let them have a breather before we go again, depending on how we want our audience to feel. It might be a nice slow film. You know, you might want to just observe the entire time, which is completely fine. But for me and the style of films that I do, I like to have a little bit of a mix. So let's have a little bit of a chat about gimbals. I know you lot know what a gimbal is. If you follow me and you know who I am, you definitely know what a gimbal is. Basically, stabilizes the camera. You can do nice tracking shots, pull-ins, pull-outs. You can do dolly shots. It's bloody great. But for me, it's a very specialist tool. I wouldn't use a gimbal all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're going to do a wedding, you want to slow things down, make it look smooth, nice. You don't want to be getting up in their face doing all this handheld stuff because you're going to make the audience feel sick and you're going to make it look like the couple are going to start fucking swinging at each other. That's not really the vibe you want to go for with a wedding video. You want to slow things down, make it nice, soft, smooth. But with a boxing video, obviously, well, you could always ask the bride and the groom if they want to swing it, but I don't think you'll get booked again if you do that. So stick to the gimbal work when it comes to weddings. Another scenario where only a gimbal is really going to work is like real estate videos, right? So you know a real estate video, it's nice push-ins, pull-outs, tilt-downs and all that kind of funky stuff, all in slow motion. It's nice, elegant. You want to show off how wide, big the rooms are. Imagine if you kind of like steamed in there, handheld, going a bit mad. It just wouldn't look right, would it? There's loads of different scenarios where only a gimbal is going to work, and other scenarios where to tell your kind of story, if you're going for a more emotional vibe, handheld is only really going to work. Personally for me, I would never ever use handheld on a product shoot, right? If you've got something that hasn't actually got a human in it, it doesn't make sense for me to go handheld because there's too much going on with the frame. You're gonna kind of push in on a product and it's gonna look shaky and handheld when really you just wanna focus on that product. You don't want the audience to feel like they're in there, like going up to it all drunk. It makes a lot of sense to go handheld when you've got a human in the frame because it feels a bit POV. It feels like you're right up there in their face. Whereas a gimbal feels a bit clinical. It don't really feel like you're up there with the character. It just feels like you're observing the character. But during my films, especially like Sky on Fire, for example, when I've got my mate Luke walking through the fog forest, there was a load of times where I used a gimbal because I wanted to introduce my audience to the scene. As soon as we kicked into that scene, you'll notice I start with a gimbal because I basically want to shock people, like, look at where we are, this is a bit mad. It's not actually about Luke at this point, it's actually about the environment. So that's why I like to establish my scene with a gimbal, but as we go in and through our scene a little bit further, I then jump into handheld, because I want people to go, whoa, this is where we are, boom, this is who we're with, and this is how we're feeling in this environment. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because yeah, sometimes handheld gimbals, it's all a bit much. So when I'm in these scenes, like on Sky on Fire, you'll probably notice every single establishing shot for me is either on sticks, on a tripod, or we're on a gimbal, and then slowly we elevate into this handheld scene, because a lot of the times I want my audience to observe the scene before I throw them in. I think it'd be a bit too intense if I threw them straight into a scene handheld up in the character's face before we've even established where we are, what time it is, time in terms of like, is it 100 BC or 2020. So in my first few frames, I want my audience to know a load of things. I want to throw a load of information at them. Who's our character? Where are they? What's the situation? And for me, it makes so much more sense to go in nice and slow with a gimbal instead of doing something erratic like getting right up in my character's face and start making the audience feel like they're going to fight them. Let's just chill out a sec. Let's establish where we are, give people a lot of information so that they subconsciously know what's going on before we start introducing them seriously to our character and making them feel like they're up dancing essentially with our character, if that makes sense. Right, so enough of the handheld kind of going a bit mad. Let's get our gimbal out and slow down a sec, because I want to talk about my guys over at Storyblocks and thank them for sponsoring today's video. So if you don't know Storyblocks, Storyblocks is a huge library of stock footage and stock assets. They've got over 1 million different assets that you can go over and download. If you've got a full subscription with Storyblocks, you can literally download as many different files as you possibly want. You can also use them for any kind of use, commercial, personal, all the other uses. They've got a range of different subscriptions, whether you're a solo shooter, you're a big marketing team, an agency, they've literally got a subscription for everyone. They've got a huge range of diverse content for any kind of needs. And of course, they've got a load of gimbal shots and a load of handheld shots too. So if you need a certain type of shooting style, I'm sure you'll be able to find it over on Storyblocks, because trust me, the library's huge. So if you think you can benefit from one of their affordable subscriptions, go to the first link in my description. Go and check out all of their different subscriptions for solo shooters, big media houses, the full works. Anyway, back to the handheld and gimbal stuff. So when it comes to handheld movement, for me, it feels a little bit like there's a human element to it. You literally feel like the lens is your audience's eyes. They're right there, they're feeling the elements. And with a gimbal, I just don't get that feeling. Obviously, all of these different shooting styles are subjective, and there's these like rules in filmmaking which you can just break. It's your film, you shoot it, you do it exactly how you want to do it. But for me, especially when I'm storyboarding, I will literally storyboard each shot and it will say how I shoot it. It will say handheld, it will say gimbals, it will say tripod, sticks, tilt up, pan to the right, pan left, you know, if you're a client, everything's a fucking pan. But the camera movement is such an important element of your film. And along with the lighting, along with your character, the emotions that they're giving off, the way that you dance with that character as the camera, you can either dance on a gimbal, you can dance up close, handheld, you can go on sticks. A lot of times I really like to go on sticks as well because I don't want any distractions. I just want them to see the frame and feel the emotion on the character's face. Sometimes sticks are the most simple way to give off where you are and how the character's feeling. Another example is like shooting cars. There's a lot of like automotive videographers, photographers, and it doesn't make sense to shoot a car handheld unless you're gonna shoot the human in the car or you wanna kind of shoot it so it looks really erratic. Because a car is kind of that grey area of, it's got energy about it, right? It's got energy like a human has, but it hasn't got human movement. So if I was personally to shoot a car or do like an automotive video, I would 100% shoot on a gimbal because it makes a lot more sense to take all of the emotion, all of the chaos away from handheld to just focus on that object, right? So I think for me, the most important thing is, am I shooting a human or am I shooting an object? If I'm shooting an object, 99.99999% of the time, I'm going to be using a gimbal. It doesn't make any sense to put human movement into an object. It's just going to feel weird. It just isn't going to feel right. And I think that's why a lot of people have gone over to using gimbals now, because a lot of people are just shooting objects. There's a lot of campaigns, a lot of commercials that people are doing with only an object in the frame. A product could be a bit of clothing, could be a trainer, could be a car. And it doesn't make any sense to me to put human emotion that you can get with handheld into a product. When it comes to camera movement, the pacing is so important as well. Handheld works great for that kind of rapid cut, fast editing to give off that chaos. It just, you're kind of bundling all of this chaos together. Handheld as a start is pretty chaotic. Then you've obviously got maybe a high intensity cut as well, loads of movement in the frame with the character. That is just gonna create so much energy, so much atmosphere that it's almost going to make the audience like they don't know where to look next, you know, loads of movement, loads of chaos. Whereas with a gimbal, slow things down. Let the audience experience where we were. Like, for example, on my Weebill 2 video, it was obviously all on a gimbal because it's a Weebill 2 video. I know it's pretty bloody obvious. But a lot of the times, I'm in this beautiful place. Like, I was very, very, very fortunate to go there, but I wanted the audience to kind of slow down, take in the audio, take in the music, and just realise where we are. It's not really about, it's about our presence in the scene. And that wouldn't really have worked handheld. It would have felt more like we were first and the scene was second, but I wanted the scene to be first and us in the frame to be second. It's about our experience in this environment. And for me, the only real way to give off that feel to my audience would be with a gimbal. So it would feel too much, there'd be too much of a human element if I'd have gone handheld on that film. I just wanted the audience to feel like they were observing this mad scene, mad place. I was just trying to like really give off nature, how lucky we are to be in this incredible planet, which is just absolutely stunning. And obviously we haven't been able to travel, and I just wanted to celebrate that. So next time you're making a film, make sure that you actively make decisions on your camera movement. It's gonna make such a big difference to how your audience actually feels at that moment when they're watching your scene. Make sure that you obviously plan everything in front of the frame, but don't forget to plan how you're gonna move the camera and do it with actual decision making in mind. Don't go, oh, this is gonna look sick. Don't get me wrong, it's easy to make things look sick. Make it actually have purpose, make your audience feel something, because that's why your audience are gonna remember it, because they felt it. They didn't just see it, they felt it. Right? So anyway, people, I really hope that gives you a very, very good insight into how I use camera movement. You lot go and do your thing, smash it out of the park, do mad camera movement that's story-based, yeah? I love making things look sick too, but if you've got a story in there, story comes first. We all know the deal. Anyway, people, thanks so much for watching, and I'll be catching you lot in the next one, mate. Bosh!